Hey chess lovers and friends, welcome back to KaspaChess. Today I've put together a special collection of my favorite videos of how to crash the Caro-Kann for you. I noticed that many of you might have missed some of these amazing gems, so I have organized them all in one place for easy access. Stay tuned and enjoy. E4, yes, not every one of your opponents is going to respond with E5. In fact, club level players like playing solid defenses such as the Caro-Kann just to bore you to death and to test your patience. So against the Caro-Kann, what I recommend doing in this video is playing knight to f3 on move 2. And just like in the French defense, you will always see Caro-Kann players responding with d5 on the second move. Because, what else? So here I recommend you just go knight c3. And this is what we call the two knights attack. Now this is our starting position of interest. From here, bishop g4 is the top played move in the Masters database. That's what people play in over-the-board games. But on lichess, d takes e4 is by far the top played move. At least that's what most people play in blitz, which is what we are going to start with. D takes e4. Well, after this move, I suggest that you immediately take back that pawn with your queen's knight, and the move that you're going to see here by far is knight to f6, both in the Masters and the lichess database. After which I recommend you just take that poor knight, opening up the position. And from here, our chess is very simple, you guys. Play d4, and your opponents will play bishop d6, again the top played move. After this, I recommend you go bishop d3, eyeballing the h7 pawn. And once again, the top played move here is castle shot by black. Now wait a second. Our main plan here is to castle long. I don't know how you are going to be developing your queenside pieces, but just remember that our main goal against the Caro-Kann defense, with the two knights attack, is to castle long so that we can start attacking from the king side. So how do we do this? We first of all start with a move pawn to h4. Bishop e3 was also playable. It's not a matter of memorizing moves, but your opponents will play rook e8 check, after which you have an option to block with your dark squared bishop and develop your queen on d2, and then you castle long. Instead of playing these highlighted moves, I want to introduce a new move to most of you guys, king f1. This is where you're going to be putting your king from today onwards. Your king on f1 is the most secured piece on earth right now. It can never be attacked immediately by any of black's pieces, you guys. Another advantage of putting your king on f1 is that you still maintain your rook on h1 to support your pawn on h4. So black can play any of these highlighted moves. Bishop g4 is by far the top played move. So let's begin with bishop g4 first. Oh, people like pinning knights whenever they have a chance. How do you punish this useless bishop pin? Well, I want you guys to shake your opponent's eyeballs by sacrificing your bishop on h7 with check. The best black can do is not to take the bishop. Otherwise, if they do, you have knight g5 check, a discovery on the light squared bishop. And if f takes g5, the top played move, you take back with your h-pawn, and that comes with the discovery check by your rook. So you see why we keep the rook on h1. After king g8, you now take the light squared bishop. If queen e7, be careful, black wants to mate you on e1, which is why you need to play bishop d2 first, and next you have a chance to play queen h5 and pawn to g6 and mate on h8. So this is a very dangerous attack to consider in the two knights attack. Alright, let's go back to this position where we play king f1, putting our king to safety after rook e8 check. So we just looked at what happens after bishop g4. I recommended sacrificing your bishop on h7 and giving black another check with knight g5. But what if black plays something else? Let's say knight d7 instead of bishop g4 here. Well, you don't resign. By the way, knight d7 is the engine's top suggestion and the second most played move in the lichess database. Well, I just recommend you go pawn to h5. That's why you pushed this pawn to h4. The whole idea is just to keep on going. And here you're going to see them play knight f8 in order to consistently defend the h7 pawn, after which you play knight h4. What I'm showing you is what people play, you guys. Queen c7. By the way, why did we play knight h4? Because we just want to complete our development of pieces. Our queen must sit on f3 where the knight was. That's why we play knight h4, by the way. And this rook will develop as highlighted maybe after playing pawn to g4. You can see this attack coming on the king side. Let's say bishop e6. Well, if you want, you can play bishop e3, but I like knight to f5. Putting the knight on the center of the board can be so annoying to your opponents, as this knight takes away many squares from black's pieces. The other idea is to provoke black to give up his bishop pair by taking our knight with his light squared bishop, so that at the end of the day we can still remain with a bishop pair, okay? But let's say they play bishop d5 attacking our queen. Well, we can play queen g4 intending to mate, and if knight e6, defending the g7 pawn or stopping the mate. If you want, you can play pawn to c4, trapping black's light squared bishop immediately, or simply go knight takes g7, which is even better, because after knight takes g7 there's a mate coming. After pawn to h6 they have to play king f8, but here we just take back with our pawn, so they have to play something like king e7 here, after which we go bishop d2. So bishop e6, rook a e1, pinning the bishop to the king, and if rook g8, we can just take on h7 with our bishop. So this is how deadly the two knights attack can be in the knight d7 line. Let's go back to this position after we put our king to safety, and then instead of black playing bishop g4 or knight d7, which we have already covered, the other move that you're going to see is pawn to h5. Well, again we have this unreal knight g5. The idea is that if f takes g5, we first of all take the h5 pawn with our queen, intending to cause some chaos on h7 together with the light squared bishop, and if g6, we can even sacrifice the bishop, and this is only good for white. And if black is not careful from here, we may end up winning this game in 3 moves. I mean, we have rook h7 and king g7 checkmate, or probably rook h8. That's why black doesn't have to take on g6 after we sacrifice our bishop on g6. You'll see them playing queen f6 again. That's equally a bad move, because we can just freely take on g5, attacking the queen, and after fg, attacking our queen. Well, we first of all rescue our queen by playing queen h7 check, an in-between move, so that wherever the king goes, we now take black's queen on g6 for free. So we can clearly see that even queen f6 by black, in this position, is not a good move, which calls for a computer move, rook e1 check. The idea is that if we take back, then they can play queen e8 check, and after king f1, they take back on g6 plus defending their g6 pawn, which is not even the savior, by the way, because white is still doing better in this position. Position is about plus 2.1 in favor of white here. Next, we are going to play bishop e3. You have pawn to h5. You can always bring in your a rook to e1. The game is almost over in this position. So this is what can happen if black plays pawn to h5 instead of bishop g4 or knight d7. So let's look at the classical line which most people play in over the board games. So again, after e4, c6, knight f3, pawn to d5, the two knights attack, instead of d takes e4, which is the top played move in the Lichess database, you are going to see most of your opponents playing the immediate bishop g4, which is the top played move in the Masters database. This is what you are going to see most of your opponents playing in tournaments. I recommend the move e takes d5, after which black is going to take with a c pawn, and then you go knight e5, attacking the light squared bishop. Oh, that hangs your queen on d1. Yep, because we have bishop b5 check. And if knight d7 by black, we can simply take that knight as well with check, and black will be forced to give up his queen. Because they cannot give up their elbow to save the game. But anyways, black doesn't have to play knight d7 here to block the check. After we play bishop b5, the move that you're going to see is knight c6 blocking the check, after which I recommend you take with your knight, not the bishop. And see, the top played move in this position according to the Lichess database is b takes c6, which turns out to be a very big blunder once again, because we have bishop takes c6, and once again, black cannot block with his toes, but I can only do it with their queen. After which we take the queen, and on the next move we win the light squared bishop. This is clearly winning for white. So b takes c6 is not a move that black should even think of in this position. You will see them playing something like queen c7 here, again which fails due to knight takes d5, attacking the queen, and at any time we have this nasty discovery, knight e5 discovery check by our light squared bishop. So black has to give up his queen in this line, after which we don't even take the queen because we have king takes d1. I mean, the queen is pinned to the king, so it cannot take our knight. But if it takes our bishop, we have knight c7 check, which will win the black queen. If a6, we have knight c3. I mean, let's go back and see what else black can do. So instead of b takes c6, which is the top played move, or queen c7, what if black plays queen d6? Well, this is equally bad because of knight e5 discovery check, and after king d8, well, we have knight takes f7, a family fork, and we'll end up capturing the queen on d6. So queen d6 is equally a bad move. So after knight takes c6, the best black can do is to play queen b6. And in this line, you as white, you need to be prepared to play the rest of the game without a queen. That's one downfall, but you're still going to have a good game. One possible line may go as follows: knight e5 discovery check, and after king d8, you take the f7 pawn with check and also threatening to take the rook next. King c8, now you take the free bishop, and if black plays d4, attacking the defender of your light squared bishop, well, you simply go bishop d3 here, giving up your knight and take on c3 with your d pawn, because you don't care, you still have a chance to capture the rook. Even if they play g6, in an effort to play bishop g7 after you take the rook, well, you can simply bring back your knight, and after queen takes f2, you have rook f1, which defends your knight. And it's funny how you can even create a fortress in the next move where black cannot even reach your king. Bishop f6 by black aims at trapping our knight, and that's why you may see them playing queen g2, but you have b3. If queen d5, you have bishop c4 defending your knight. And let's say king d7, black wants to win your knight with his rook, so you go rook e1, trying to rescue your knight. Rook f8, I mean, you got bishop c4, and black has to be very careful because tables can turn around if they play e6 and then you take on e6, and right here position is +1 in favor of white despite being down a queen. Cause I mean, look at this beautiful defense that you've created on the queen side. This is where you're going to hide your king, and it's hardly easy for black to reach your king right here. So you need to be prepared to play without the queen. So of course you begin with pawn to e4 and then pawn to c6, which is the Caro-Kann defense. I have a full course on this defense, by the way. You guys, you can check it out on my website www.KaspaChess.com. So just like in my previous video, which I created on the Caro-Kann defense, even in today's video, we'll still be looking at the two knights attack after d5 and knight c3, where we develop our two knights first before developing any of the other pieces. You guys, this is my favorite way of playing against the Caro-Kann defense. And yes, by far the top played move is d takes e4, after which you take back on e4 with your queen's knight. Now wait a second, in my last video on this attack, I covered the move knight to f6, which happens to be the top played move. But in this particular video, we are looking at two responses by black. I mean, from here, bishop f5 and bishop g4. And let me give you a quick hint. In the two knights attack against the Caro-Kann defense, our plan is very simple. We always want to castle long, okay? That is at best. At worst, we don't mind castling short. So the move sequence here would be pawn to d4, bishop e3, or maybe bishop f4, I don't know. Then you develop your queen to d2, and then you castle long and start pawn storming from the king side, because that's where most of your opponents will castle, and by that time your pawn will be on h4. I mean, that's basically our quick plan, but not so fast. Let's see what to do after black plays bishop f5, attacking your knight. Well, I recommend you go knight g3, attacking the bishop, and after bishop g6, which is what they play, you go pawn to h4, wanting to trap the bishop after playing pawn to h5. So by far, pawn to h6 is the move that you're going to see, after which I recommend you go knight to e5. Now wait a second, don't skip this video. Yes, in one of my previous videos, I did cover this line briefly, but this is going to be a complete attack, unlike anything I showed you in any of my previous videos. So the idea is just to take the light squared bishop here, which is why you see most of your opponents putting this bishop on h7. What do I recommend? Again, you go queen h5, wanting to checkmate on f7. So you will see your opponents playing pawn to g6, the top played move again. What do? Wait a second. Don't ever think of playing queen f3 here. as your queen will be doing nothing on f3, the move I recommend is bishop c4 first, completely sacrificing your queen. And it's amazing how many people fail to see this mate in one. I mean, over 9,000 people have fallen victim of this trap. What's wrong with people? They have eyes but they cannot see. Black doesn't have to take our queen on h5. The best they can do is to play pawn to e6. And once again, you don't play queen f3 here. Instead, you go queen e2, because that's where your queen belongs in this line. Now, see these highlighted arrows in red. Out of 6 possible moves, only one, queen e7, is the correct move for black. So that's just how tricky this line can be, you guys. E.g., if they play bishop g7 here, the top played move, you can simply sacrifice your knight on f7, double attacking the queen and the rook. And if king takes f7, that'll be a mate in one, you guys. So black doesn't have to take with his king on f7. The best they can do is to play queen e7, letting us win the free rook on h8, and after they take, what I like doing is oversimplifying the game from here, because we are just up a pawn, that's one, plus up an exchange. So why not oversimplifying the game and take this game straight into an endgame? Look, the whole idea here is just to start trading off pieces but not pawns. That's one of the middle game principles. We keep pawns for the end game, because in the end game, we'll most likely remain with 2 rooks plus 2 extra pawns, while black will only remain with a rook and a knight, or maybe a rook and a bishop. That'll be an endgame from here. We are just 2 pawns up here. So that's just a little secret that I wanted to share with you guys. So back to this position, we just looked at the bishop g7 line. What if black plays the second most played move, knight to f6 here? Well, this is equally bad because again we play knight takes f7, double attacking the queen and rook. The best black can do is to play queen e7, because you know what happens after king takes f7. We have queen takes e6 check and then mate in one. So the best black can do here is to play queen e7, not taking our knight on f7. Anyways, let's look at something else that black can do instead of playing knight to f6. I mean, after we play queen back to e2. Alright, so after queen e2, instead of bishop g7 or knight to f6, black can also play something like knight d7 here, which is bad because we still have knight takes f7, again double attacking the queen and the rook. And this time, if they are wise enough not to take the knight on f7 and play queen e7, well, we still take the rook, and after bishop g7, we go for simplification in order to take the game into an endgame. Again, we are just 2 pawns up in this position, so start trading off pieces. I mean, these big pieces, but not pawns. The game from here may continue as follows. Knight c5, attacking the bishop, but you have bishop h3, ensuring that you still keep your bishop pair. You want to go with it in the endgame. Rook d8, you go castle short and start developing your pieces on their most potential squares. I mean, from here it will just be your game. There is little that black can do to stop all these threats coming, which will be very painful to see with their eyeballs. Let's look at the correct move that black should play instead of knight d7. Alright, so instead of knight d7, black should better play queen e7, because now our knight takes on f7 doesn't work. So we better play something else, and I recommend playing knight e4. Sometimes we just put our knights on the center in order to take away many squares from our enemy's pieces. For example, if black plays bishop g7 here, attacking our knight, we can simply play pawn to d4, defending that knight. Black doesn't have to take because we'll have knight d6 check, and our knight is going to sit on the d6 square for a longer period of time. Let's say knight d7 here. We can just trade off our knights, and after queen takes d7, this is even bad for black because of pawn to d5, which is very dangerous, by the way, because if black takes with his e-pawn, now we play knight f6 double check and we'll end up winning the queen on d7. Or let's say if they take with their c-pawn instead of the e-pawn, let's say c takes d5, we have bishop b5 supported by our queen on e2, and that pins black's queen on d7 to the king on e8. So taking with a c-pawn is equally bad, which is why the best black can do in this position is just to castle long, letting us take the e6 pawn with our d-pawn, after which they should take with their f-pawn. But after we castle short, I don't see a way for white to lose this game, unless there's something wrong with your eyeballs or whatever. So there's a line where black doesn't necessarily need to play bishop h7 after we play knight e5. I mean, they can also play queen d6 defending their bishop, but that is not the savior because position here is about +1 in favor of white. You can just go on and take that light squared bishop, taking away black's bishop pair. And after queen g6, well, you have d4 with the idea of castling long after developing the bishop and the queen. So knight d7, for example, black also wants to castle long. And this is where you can play bishop a4 if you want, bishop e3 or queen d2 and castle long. This is just how flexible the two knights attack is, you guys. What are we talking about? This should be your best against the Caro-Kann defense. Go and analyze it with all your eyeballs. Here is where you now take your time to appreciate my content and hit that like button, which is closer to your thumb, you guys, in order to encourage me to keep on making more wonderful videos just like this one. Not to mention that if you are not a subscriber yet, you can do the needful by subscribing to this channel so that you don't miss any of my future uploads. I mean, that's just how it works on YouTube. Alright, back to our initial position of the two knights attack against the Caro-Kann defense c6 and d5. So we just played knight c3 and then black takes on e4 with his d pawn, not with his elbow, but then you take back with your knight. And it was here where I said black may either play bishop f5 or bishop g4. So let's look at the third most played move, bishop g4. Now hold on, do you know that the game may transpose back to the previous lines that I just showed you after we play pawn to h3, attacking this bishop on g4? For example, if black plays bishop h5, maintaining the pin, we simply go knight g3, attacking that light squared bishop once again. And after they play bishop g6, we play pawn to h4, wanting to trap that bishop. And again, h6 is by far the top played move, after which we play knight e5, attacking the bishop. If they go bishop h7, I mean, we are just back to the same line that I showed you guys in the introduction of this video. So that's just how chess history can repeat itself at times. But hey, wait a second. After pawn to h3, black doesn't always have to play bishop h5. They also have an option to take on f3 with their bishop. So here I just recommend you don't take back with your g-pawn but your queen. The idea is that if they play pawn to e6, you now go pawn to d3. I mean, it's pointless to develop your bishop to c4 because there is a pawn on e6, right? Even though that is also playable, you can just play d3. The whole idea, remember, is to castle long after developing our dark squared bishop. So that's why we play pawn to d3. And then they'll play knight f6, you now go bishop e3. I mean, if they take your knight, you can always take with your d-pawn. Next, you're going to develop your light squared bishop and decide where you want to castle. I like going long. Anyways, you won't see them taking on e4 with their knight. After you play bishop e3, they'll play something like knight b d7, after which you can safely castle long. That's the whole idea in the two knights attack, you guys. You now start expanding on the king side, put your king to safety on b1, and maybe later on you're going to play a4 or a3. I mean, I don't know. So that's just one way of playing this so-called two knights attack in the bishop g4 line. Let's go back. Again, black plays bishop g4. Now, instead of playing pawn to h3 here, I want you guys to try out this Kaspa move, bishop c4, with the idea of punishing black's light squared bishop on g4. And by the way, we still want to castle long. Let me show you one common blunder that black plays here. Knight to f6, which looks like a natural move, is a very big blunder by black, because that allows knight to e5, and from here black should pack his bag and go home. Oh, our queen is hanging, so they thought it was a free queen, but that hangs mate in one after bishop takes f7 check, because they couldn't stop this with their elbow. But anyways, what if black doesn't take our queen on d1 after we play knight e5, double attacking their bishop? Let's say they play queen d4 here. Well, we just simply take on f7 with check first. And after king d8, we now go knight takes g4, because anyways, we are going to defend our g2 pawn with knight e3, which also blocks the check. I mean, if pawn to e5, we can just castle short on the next move, and we are good to go. Anyways, so instead of that, what if black plays bishop e6? Well, we just take that bishop, and after pawn takes, we take the knight on f6. ef, we go queen h5 check, if g6 will take the pawn and take the rook, but if king e7, this can go a long way and something that will be very painful to watch. By black, they may end up quit this game of chess. Anyways, but let's see something else that black can do. Back to the bishop g4 line, where I recommended to play this sneaky move bishop c4 in an effort to mate in one after bishop takes d1. Well, you won't always see black playing knight to f6 in this position. In fact, the top played move here is pawn to e6, after which I suggest you go pawn to h3. Now start hitting on this bishop, that's the whole idea. If bishop h5, again you go knight g3, they go bishop g6, h4 once again. So here we are just doing the same thing, just like what I showed you in the introduction of this video. Again, they will play pawn to h6. It doesn't matter even if they go h5, you still go knight e5, attacking the bishop. If bishop h7, well, you don't go queen h5, because black can play queen e7, right? So you go queen e2, provoking knight to f6, which is the top played move, so that you can mate black in style once again with queen f5 checkmate. So that's just a little trap that may happen after queen f6 in this line. And let's say if they play knight d7, the second most played move, again you go knight takes f7, same sacrifice, same mate. So without wasting much of your time, you start with e4, then obviously black responds with c6, the Caro-Kann defense, and then instead of going pawn to d4, one stable opening that I recommend is the two knights attack against the Caro-Kann defense. So that's why you develop your two knights first before developing your d-pawn. And for disclosure, this is the game that I played against a FIDE master on Chess yesterday, and spoiler alert, I won the game in 9 moves. So I played knight to f3, and after d5, because that's what Caro-Kann players play, I played knight c3. Then as usual, my opponent took on e4 and I took back. At this point, I was expecting black to play bishop f5, after which I was going to play knight g3 and pawn to h4 to try and trap that bishop, but my opponent played knight d7, which most masters love playing, especially in the masters database. It's the second most played move. One of black's ideas is to put his king's knight on f6 so that these two knights can be able to see each other, and this also prepares for pawn to e5, by the way, which is why I decided to play bishop c4 right away in the opening stage. And this is the area of our mate in this study. I do recommend that you make use of this bishop move. It just forces black to be up on his toes and increase his chances to blunder. My opponent played knight gf6, which was okay, but right in this position, I started imagining the Tennyson gambit, where we sacrifice our light squared bishop on f7 and win black's free queen on d8. This is how we visualize chess, you guys. So I played pawn to d3, expecting black to take so that it can help me to open up this file for my queen, which happened in the game, by the way. And I knew that on the next move, there was a high chance for my opponent to blunder. For example, he played knight b6, and that's how I sacrificed my bishop on f7, bishop takes f7 check. The only move was king takes f7, after which I won his queen and my opponent resigned. So these traps don't just work against beginners. Instead of knight b6, if my opponent played something like knight f6 in this position, well, I was still going to take on f7 with my bishop and win black's queen in the same style. Now wait a second, we're still looking at the power of bishop c4 in most of these offbeat openings. So let me show you another idea behind this move. Let's say after e4, c6, then again the two knights attack, d takes e4, knight takes e4 and knight d7, which my opponent played. The other idea behind bishop c4 is to provoke pawn to e6 so that we can sacrifice our bishop either on e6 or even on f7. For example, if black plays knight gf6, remember this may be happening in the tournament. This time you change the move sequence by going knight eg5, targeting the weak f7 square with two of your minor pieces, and this provokes black to play pawn to e6. You can see that's the top played move in the Chess database, and this is when you play queen e2, now putting more pressure on this pawn on e6. If black plays the second most played move, bishop e7, well, this is a very terrible blunder and can lead to mate in 4 after knight takes f7. So you now sacrifice your knight on f7. By the way, in some lines, we also sacrifice the bishop on e6. But in this particular line, knight takes f7 is better because if black takes, this will be a mate in 4. For example, black cannot go back because of queen f7 checkmate. And if king g6, it's just a matter of finding the right moves. coupled with your patience. Bishop d3 check, king h6, then you go queen e3 check, and whatever black does, this will be a mate in one. But one may ask, after we play knight eg5, provoking pawn to e6, and then queen a2, what if black doesn't play bishop e7, and let's say they play a more logical move, knight b6, which also counterattacks the bishop? Well, if you want, you can play bishop b3, but there's this forcing sequence that you can try out, especially in tournaments. You go knight e5 first, allowing black to take your bishop, and then you take back on c4 with your queen. Then you can see queen d5 is by far the top played move, after which you just exchange queens, you simplify the game, and at the end of the day walk out with a pawn. So you can see right on move 11, you are already up a pawn and black is already defending. So the way you play in the tournament or in other competitive games is that you need to make sure that you're the one who is applying a lot of pressure. The more you keep on applying pressure on your opponents, the higher the chances for them to blunder. So that's just how it works. Now, after playing the two knights attack, it's not always that black will play knight d7 after they take your pawn. Sometimes they can play knight to f6, which is the top played move. And here the simplest you can do is just to exchange knights, but using the concept of pressurizing my opponents in the opening stage. I like playing queen e2, just being tricky in the opening stage to keep my opponents up on their toes. Queen e2 eliminates certain moves like knight bd7, which can be met by knight d6, smothered mate, which is something for beginners to learn. But after this, you're going to see most of your opponents taking your knight, after which you just take back with your queen. And this is when you can see they play knight d7 once again. Then you remember to develop your light squared bishop where it belongs. Bishop c4, they first of all play knight f6 attacking your queen. You don't even do anything about your queen. The move is knight e5, again provoking pawn to e6. By the way, if black plays pawn to e6, their light squared bishop will be unhappy and locked. So that's what you're looking for in the opening stage. If they take your queen, there's a mate in one, by the way, in case you didn't know. So pawn to e6 has to be played, after which you go queen h4, they play bishop e7, the top played move, and now you go pawn to d4, paving way for your dark squared bishop. And in most of these Caro-Kann positions, you always have chance to castle long if you want to, but just to be safe, castling short is not much of a stretch. If black castles short, now you go bishop d3, just putting more pressure on your opponent. Even if the game is not mating anytime soon, this is how you're supposed to be playing in order to confuse your opponents. And this works like magic, especially in tournaments. If you are the one putting more pressure, you're likely to make your opponent blunder or forget something. For example, here you can go pawn to h4 and the game is in your favor. Anyways. Alright, the next bullet trick that you can try is against the Caro-Kann defense. You start with e4, they play c6, d4, and then you go d5. I'm a fan of knight c3, honestly. I don't like advancing my pawn. If d takes e4, you take back with your knight. And there are so many ways in which black can continue here, but one of the most popular ways, in fact, the second most played move in the Masters database is knight d7. Now this is called the Karpov variation. One of the main ideas to develop the queen's knight to the f6 square later on. So here black is expecting to see you play classically with the move knight to f3 and maybe bishop c4 so that they can quickly connect their two knights in some variations, of course. But here is where you can test your opponent's patience by playing queen e2 immediately. Queen e2 is also playable at grandmaster level. It's like the 6th move in the Masters database. And from here, believe it or not, knight gf6 is the 3rd most played move in the Lichess database, which is a blunder because of knight d6. Again, checkmate. You can also set this same trick in the Reti opening. Let's say you begin with the move knight to f3 on move 1. Another trick, you guys, you will see most of your opponents, especially in bullet, playing pawn to e4 here. You just take the pawn. That's another bullet trick. So they'll go pawn to c6 anyways. The Caro-Kann defense, you go e4, they'll play d5, and then you play knight c3. This is one of Carlsen's favorite openings. If d takes e4, we simply take back with our knight. They'll go knight f6, and once again they expect you to play moves such as bishop d3 or simply taking on f6. But here it's time to test their patience. Go queen e2 once again, and the plans are very simple. If knight takes, we take back with our queen. We also have moves such as pawn to d4. We develop our light squared bishop to c4. But just like in the cup of variation, you see them playing knight bd7, after which you can safely mate on d6 once again. But trap number 1 in the Caro-Kann defense cup of variation. This is where you begin with e4, then black plays c6, the Caro-Kann defense, and then you go d4, then d5, and then you play knight c3, and d takes e4 is the top played move right in this position where you have to take back with your knight. And now it's time to wait and see what black is up to. Looking into the master's database, you can see that bishop f5 is the top played move. We are going to look at that in the second trap. And then we see knight d7 being the second common move in the master's database, which is the main area of our interest in this first trap. So say your opponent's playing knight d7, which is called the cup of variation, by the way. The idea is black wants to play knight gf6, e6, bishop e7, and castle shot given a chance. But that's what we want. In this position, guys, believe it or not, the main theoretical move which most grandmasters play is simply knight g5. Like, what? This is an interesting move with chances to blow black off the board, guys. In case black plays pawn to h6 in this position, try to guess the best move, also supported by Stockfish. Let's go. Right, hope you found the solution. The move, ladies and gentlemen, is knight e6. Like, guys, this is also playable even in real classical tournaments, and I'm not even joking. And I can't believe that f takes e6 is the third common move in the Lichess database, obviously, which is played by amateurs, but this leads to a mate in 1. Oh, a mate in 2, like this. This is checkmate. So that's the first funny trap, and I guess most of your advanced opponents won't fall for this. It's cheap. And you know what? At times, your opponents will just play something like knight to f6, thinking they are stopping queen h5, but forgetting that you're attacking the queen. So on the next move, you'll just grab that free queen. And so your advanced opponents will obviously play something like queen a5 check here, and then this is when you play bishop d2, blocking the check. And also attacking the queen, by the way. The queen has to cover the c7 square, otherwise you're going to play knight c7 check and win the rook on a8. So queen b6 is a logical move here, after which you can continue playing normally with the move bishop d3, setting up another trap. And it's in this position where even masters tend to fall for the same trap that I showed you at first. You can see with your own eyeballs in the masters database, f takes e6 has been played at least once, which is a very terrible blunder due to queen h5 check once again. And if black thinks the king will be able to escape, here you have a very deadly move, you guys. Try to guess the move and leave your answers right in the comment section down below. Let's go. First of all, I'm disappointed if at all you were looking at bishop f4. Why are you like this, guys? The move here is simply bishop a5, pinning the queen to the king, and for the sake of respect, black should resign in this position because your bishop is supported by your queen, right? So black's queen will be dead. Even if knight gf6 comes, you can simply take the queen first, and after AB, you now rescue your queen, or maybe just put it on g6. Game over. You can do more research on this, but just consider playing knight g5 in the cup of variation and all your problems are over. Let's look at the real stuff. After knight g5, instead of pawn to h6, which allows us to go knight e6, say black plays knight gf6 right in this position, stopping queen h5 in advance and now ready to play pawn to h6. Well, the move that I recommend here is bishop c4, now targeting the f7 square, so that in case of h6, you can simply mate with your bishop just like that. Instead of h6, you're going to see most of your opponents playing pawn to e6, the top played move, by the way, after which you can now go queen e2, and lo, is this not the position that I showed you in the introduction of this video, guys? Let's be honest, your queen on e2, your bishop on c4, and your knight on g5. This is how you beat most of your opponents, guys. So there are two popular moves right in this position, and they are both wrong. As you can see in the Lichess database, the top played move is knight b6, followed by bishop e7. Let's begin with the worst. Bishop e7. Once you see this bishop move, I suggest you become polite and escort your opponent to go to the market where his mama sent him to buy stuff. Guys, the move here is simply knight takes f7, sacrificing your knight, also double attacking the queen and the rook. If black takes, that will be a mate in 3 after queen takes, and wherever the king goes, that will be checkmate. If king g6, that will only be a delayed mate after bishop d3 check, and then king h5, then queen h3 checkmate. Bingo. Subscribe. Right. After bishop e7 and knight takes sacrifice, you will see some of your opponents playing queen a5 check, an in-between move, trying to rescue their queen and then maybe rescue their rook on the next move. But you have bishop d2 in this position, attacking the queen. So the queen has to go back, after which you simply grab the free rook on h8. And in some cases, you may even be able to rescue your knight. So say knight f8, that's what they like doing. And now you can simply go bishop b3, that's all. Even if they take your b2 pawn, it doesn't count because you can just go rook d1 in this position. Even if they take your d4 pawn, this is when you can go knight f7 in an effort to rescue your knight. And sadly, they don't even have to capture this because after all, if they capture, you still have queen takes e6 check, and wherever the king goes, that'll be bad for black. So again, if king g6, you simply go queen f7 check, and after king f5 only move, there are so many ways to kill a rat, one of which is going pawn to g4 check. There's no knight takes because that knight is pinned, so they have to take with either the king or the queen, after which you go bishop d3 check, and it's just a matter of time before you checkmate your opponent, guys. There should be a mate in 5 here. So let's move on. Trap number 2, the bishop f5 response. Instead of the Karpov variation, say after c6, d4, d5, knight c3, pawn takes, knight takes, and then instead of knight d7, black plays the top played move, bishop f5. Well, I don't advise people to resign here. The best you can do here is going knight g3, and then they'll play bishop g6, so you can go pawn to h4, trying to trap that bishop somehow. The top played move is h6, creating this room for the bishop, and now you simply go knight to f3 because what else? And this is when you will see most of your opponents developing their king's knight. And guess what? Now you simply go knight e5 once again, getting ready for that piece setup that I showed you at first, guys. They play bishop h7, and now you simply go bishop c4. See how you set up that position, now attacking this. So black usually plays pawn to e6, covering that sham, and now you go queen e2. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to the similar setup that I showed you in the introduction of this video. This time, our knight is not on g5, it's on e5, but it still performs the same job, you guys. Because the thing is, if black plays the top played move, as you can see in the Leech's database, knight bd7, you are winning with this move. Knight takes f7, double attacking the queen and the rook once again. If king takes, there's a mate in 2 here which begins with queen takes e6 check, and after king g6 only move, you simply go queen f5. Bingo. Trap number 5, in the 2 knights attack against the Caro-Kann once again, after pawn to e4, c6, knight f3, d5 again, knight c3, pawn takes, knight takes, and knight d7. First of all, this is different from the Karpov variation, but it's also playable, by the way, with the same ideas. How is this different from the Karpov variation? Remember, in the Karpov variation, we always have a pawn on d4. Our king's knight sits on g1, so that's the only difference. So instead of the knight sitting on f3, in the Karpov variation, our pawn sits on d4 by this time. So that's the major difference, you guys. And certain Caro-Kann players tend to confuse these 2 variations. But anyways, even after this, you can simply go bishop c4, trying to create the same position which I showed you. For example, after they play the top played move knight gf6, instead of taking or playing knight g3 like what everybody does, you can still go knight eg5, attacking the f7 pawn. So they have to play e6, after which you go queen e2. Once again, welcome back to the same position, the same piece setup that I showed you at the intro. And what do we see again? I said sometimes you will see your opponents playing knight b6. I'm gonna show you. But if bishop e7 is played anyways, Once again, you can simply go knight takes f7, attacking two things, and maybe you are going to have that mate in 4 which I showed you. Say after king g6, you go queen f7 check. By the way, if king h6, you have d4. If king f5 is played, you have bishop e6 check, and after king e4, you simply mate with your pawn. Anyway, spoiler alert, we will always be checkmating our opponents on d8. Let's say you're having white pieces, you play pawn to e4, your opponent responds with pawn to c6, the Caro-Kann defense, d4, d5, and then you go knight to c3. So here you are going to see black taking on e4, you take back with your knight, and then they will play knight to f6. And ladies and gentlemen, knight to f6 introduces the Tartakoff variation, which was popularized by Tartakoff Savielli from France, who was actually the black player in the game that we are analyzing. And here Retty Richard was having white pieces. So instead of taking the knight on f6, I suggest you go queen to d3. Right in this position, if black decides to take the knight on e4, we simply take back with the queen and play bishop e3, we castle on, bishop e2, and then we start expanding on the king side. And congrats, you just learned how to play against the Caro-Kann defense very easily. Now, right in this position, instead of taking the knight, black has this tactical idea of playing pawn to e5. You may think black just wants to exchange queens, but that's not the idea, because if black takes your queen, he will just help you develop your minor piece by making you recapture on d3 and defend your knight on e4. So you will see them play queen f5 check. The whole idea is that if you block the check, they then take your pawn on e5, plus pinning your knight to the king. This is a tactical shot that you are going to see from time to time. And not only is black pinning your knight to the king, they are also eyeing the b2 pawn, which is undefended. And so here it looks like the only way you can save your knight is by playing pawn to f3. But this pawn to f3 move weakens the dark squares along this diagonal. And again, you may end up losing the b2 pawn. So this is not a tactic that one should overlook. And this is where I suggest that you go crazy and just give up this knight by simply castling long. And trust me, you are going to see your opponents taking this free knight, because why not? They also have plans to take on f2 and attack both your rook and your queen on d3. But here is where you're going to shock your opponents with this dynamite move, queen to d8 check. Oh, Caspar, this is a free queen because the bishop is blocking the rook. Yes, if king takes d8, we have bishop g5, which is double checked by the rook and the bishop. And here black played king c7, then bishop d8 is checkmate. And that's the first checkmate on d8. Just in case you are wondering what was going to happen if black played king e8, white would have played rook d8 checkmate, since this diagonal is covered by the dark squared bishop. Alright, so the first game is where we start with pawn to e4, assuming we are having white pieces, right? Then black responds with c6, and that's the Caro-Kann defense. Then we go pawn to d4, and then they play pawn to d5. Now, if you are a keen follower of my content, you should be able to recall that I'm a fan of the knight to c3 line, instead of advancing my e-pawn to e5. But in this video, we are doing the opposite. We are going to push pawn to e5 anyways. And what you're going to see most people do after pawn to e5 is playing pawn to c5 right away. This is a new line in the Caro-Kann defense. I mean, courses have been made on this move. This is called the Botvinnik-Kaus defense, so not a strange move. I saw Levy covering this move in one of his old videos. So pawn to c5 is quite a good move in the advanced variation of the Caro-Kann defense. So this is what we want to see. Now from here, you simply go pawn to c3. And what you're going to see Caro-Kann players here playing is knight to c6. Hitting on the center right away. Then what do I recommend? Knight f3. Now you can check the Lichess database for yourselves. You will find that bishop g4 is by far the top played move, pinning our king's knight to the queen on d1. And so I don't like what most white players play here. Bishop e2 and then a castle shot. Well, try this. D takes c5. That's a very interesting move. Because here it looks like we are just in trouble with this added layer of pressure on the knight. I mean, we just gave up our e5 pawn for free. And so you're going to see most of your unprepared opponents taking on e5. Because our king's knight cannot take back. It is pinned to our queen. But actually, black is the one who is lost in this position, you guys. Nearly 4,000 people have blundered into this trap on leeches. Knight takes e5 is a blunder because this knight is just a free piece, believe it or not. Now we are threatening to take black's light squared bishop. And this is where you shout, "Oh no, my queen," in Eric Rosen's voice. Bishop takes d1 is the top played move here, after which you go bishop b5 check. I mean, black cannot even use his hands to block the check right here. It can't help. So they have to use their queen and lose it on the next move. Bishop takes d7 check, king d8 only move, after which we now take on f7 with check, forking the king on d8 and the rook on h8. Ladies and gentlemen, it doesn't matter what black does, they are going to lose their rook on h8. And here you can see that black has remained with 3 pieces against 5 pieces. And if he's not very careful, he might end up allowing us to rescue our knight on h8. I mean, we have g4, g5, and g6. At worst, we'll just sacrifice our knight on g6 and make his pawns to double up along the g file. We are going to remain with 4 pieces and he will remain with only 3 pieces. But wait, time to play an advanced opponent here. Okay, I'm playing against a 2400 rated chess player. So e4, okay, c6, there we have the Caro-Kann defense again. Let me go knight f3. Knight c3 will come later on. That's the 2 knights attack. Yeah, that's how people should play the Caro-Kann defense. d5. Now I go knight c3 here. This is the 2 knights attack, you guys. I expect him to take. Oh, also they play g6. This is another variation. I think here I can just play pawn to d4. Pawn to d4, or maybe, yeah, just taking the center. What can I do here to entertain your eyeballs? I think pawn to d4, yes. Next, oh, okay, so d takes e4. Now, let me take the pawn. I'm just thinking of castling long, you guys. Just like what I told you. I think let me take the knight. That's a dubious move. Black is allowing himself to have double pawns along the f file. So let me take the knight. And he will have to take with his e pawn. I don't think this position is great for black. I don't know, maybe he thinks he's an advanced player, he can do anything he wants. So am I bowling the weak f7 pawn now with my bishop on c4? So bishop g7, I guess he wants to castle short. And by the way, I can put my king on f1 if I want. I love putting my king on f1. So queen e2 check first. Can I exchange queens? Or maybe, for the sake of your eyeballs, let me keep my queen by playing bishop e3. Yeah, I think bishop e3, saving my queen. If queen b4 by black check, I have pawn to c3 blocking the check. My queen on e2 is defending the pawn on b2. Now I go h4. h4. So black just castled short. And since I'm not thinking of castling short, I'm going to play h5 next. And if bishop takes my h5 pawn, I'll sacrifice my rook to open up the king side, okay? Because if the g file is open, now my queen's rook, oh, okay. So, bishop takes f3. I wanted to bring my queen's rook on g1. Anyways, I just took on f3 with my g-pawn. So let's see what black is going to do here. My idea was to castle long and put my queen's rook on g1. That was after sacrificing my rook. Okay, so there we see queen b4 check. But yeah, I talked about this, you guys. I have c3 blocking the check, and at the same time, my b2 pawn is defended by my queen on e2. I'm also planning to castle long. Okay, queen a5 by black. Can I castle long? Or maybe I take on g6, yeah, to open up the king side. Next, I'm going to castle long. That is if I want, or maybe I can take advantage of the g6 pawn since my light squared bishop is pinning the f pawn to the king. I'm just planning to take on g6 with my queen right now. Okay, pawn to g5. Let me go rook g1, I think. Planning to capture on g6. Since the pawn on f7 is pinned to the king, it cannot take my rook. Okay, so b5 attacking my bishop. Let me maintain the pin. Bishop b3, I think. Yeah, bishop. Sorry. Yeah, pawn to b5. Bishop b3. Still pinning the f pawn, the f7 pawn to the king. So, what are they going to do? I'm still threatening to take the g6 pawn, by the way. I don't know what black should do here. Maybe king h7. I'll just castle long. Time is ticking. Time is going. Oh, f4. I think, let me just take on g6 with my queen. Yep. This is a blunder though. Queen takes g6. Next, I'm threatening to mate on g7. Okay, and that's all for today, you guys. Let me know which episode you liked the most in the comment section down below, and if at all you would love to see more of these kinds of content where I compile my favorite videos in one collection, of course, to make it easier for you guys, let me know. Thank you so much for watching. Until next time, bye bye.